Thank you for staying tuned. Well, reactions and counter-reactions have continued to trail the new cash withdrawal policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Some say the move will boost monetary policy effectiveness, tax compliance, and strengthen the Naira, while others are of the view that the development will have an adverse effect on operations of small business owners. It will be recalled that the Apex Bank, in a letter dated December 6, 2022, placed a cap on cash withdrawals under the new dispensation, restricting the maximum cash withdrawal over the counter by individuals and corporate organizations per week to 100,000 and 500,000, respectively. The new withdrawal regime further pegged the maximum cash withdrawal per week via automated teller machine ATMs at 100,000, subject to maximum of 20,000 naira cash withdrawal per day, adding that only denominations of 200 naira and below shall be loaded into ATMs, while maximum amounts that can be withdrawn via points of sales POS terminals has been limited to 20,000 daily. According to the Apex Bank, the policy is meant to discourage hoarding of the local currency in a bid to check inflationary pressure as well as address critical security issues. Well, let's take a critical look at all of these issues, the pros and the cons of this monetary policy and overall performance of the economy. Well, I'm being joined live in the studio by the Chief Investment Officer of Afrinvest West Africa, Mr. Robert Omotunde. Thank you so much. It's good to have you in the house after some time. How's it been?
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
A lot of policy changes, increase in interest rates, and now we are being greeted with this. I don't think I've actually got to your view first with regards to the planned redesign. Well, the president has launched it already. Yeah. What do you think of that move first by the Apex Bank? Let's start on that note.
I think that, much has been said on that, but we must be clear as to what impact it will have on the overall economy. In terms of monetary policy management, we think that the impact is muted. We won't see much impact because, again, what is happening is the central bank redesigning the currency in itself, changing the face of the currency for a new one. As much as it helps to enhance the security of the currency, because, of course, I believe that new security features have been put in place in the new currency that will prevent counterfeiters from, profiting from, counterfeiting the currency. But as much as, beyond that, I do not think that there will be much impact on monetary policy. Because before now, currency in circulation is barely 7% of the, aggregate money supply. And to that extent, we do not think that 7% impact is, even if you get everything, cashless, where currency in circulation is 0%, and you have everything moving within the banking system, it still would not have as much impact. And then knowing that currency in circulation is in itself a phenomenon that even the most advanced economies of the world are still engaging in. Nigerian economy, to a very large extent, has become cashless. Since we started our cashless policy, I think as far back as 2011, 2012, we have seen significant progress, significant progress, I would say, to the extent that currency in circulation is only about 7% of the aggregate money supply. To a very large extent, that is extremely cashless, relative to other developed economies like the UK, the US, who are still closer to, even 20%, 10% levels. So I think as a country, we're not doing badly in terms of, management of cash. But again, I believe there are other latent reasons why the central bank is going through the current, spate of changes that we're seeing with regards to currency management. But to, further get us cashless, I don't think, what they are doing will make us further cashless.
Yes, that's where I'm going. Because I see that one way or the other, we'll be left with no other option than to do online transactions and all of that, when you cannot get all of those amounts over the counter. Maybe that will be more traceable. We could be able to trace transactions and all of that. Security issues, I'm thinking.
Absolutely. Security measures, yes, because if you ask people, like we have security issues that we're grappling with as a country, kidnapping, and then where, kidnappers are asking people for ransom and people are to pay in cash. But if you look at these policies and you dimension them, right, it's some of the steps that have been taken, so that we're not suggestive on TV. There are other ways people can still get all these things done, if they don't get, because don't forget, to the extent that there are limits, okay, to the extent that there are limits, those who want to gain the system, we can always find ways, to do that. What I would say is that the efforts of the central bank, it's good. But we have to know that every time there is a policy move, there are pros and there are cons. But these policies are not directly tied to monetary policy management.
So it's not like it's going to help us address any reigning inflation.
It's not going. Let's not forget, inflation is cost push, largely cost push in the country. So even if you change the design of the currency, the face of the currency by redesigning, or you limit the amount of cash transactions that people can engage in, and you say, okay, you can only get maximum currency of 200 naira as cash from the ATM, that technically does not reduce the price of rice
value,
or a tuber of yam.
Value.
Yes, because again, what got the price of a tuber of yam to sell for as much as 2,000 or more, that you buy it, is there are other supply side factors that are more endemic than whatever monetary gymnastics we're doing right now. They can't address a fundamental issue like inflation in the country that we can trace directly to a supply side shock. So I think that must be clear. However, some of these policies, like we've said, I think you read it out during your introduction. If you look at some of the efforts, benefits that have been suggested, the fact that you can capture within the financial system how transactions are moving, it could help the government, because our economy is still largely informal. It could help the government to get more people from the informal sector within the banking system, and then you can get to know how the transactions are moving and know where you can appropriately tax. That's good. But again, let's also look at the burden that comes on those who stay within largely rural areas. So those in the rural areas, they are likely to suffer the most. There are a lot of arguments as to whether is it even in their best interest, because if you look at their transactions are largely cash driven, which is what makes all these agency banks thriving in those areas. Now, even for the agency banking business, there's a lot of impact that this is going to have on them, because again, if your cash withdrawal limit is 5 million naira in a week or in a month, I think 5 million is for a month.
5 million
is for a month, yes. 5 million naira is for a month. And some of these guys do transactions of 5 million naira in a day. So it's now how you want to manage, that technicality, right? Or maybe some of them will go all out to say, okay, we will bear the costs. I think the 5 million is even at the cost of 5%.
5%.
Absolutely. So even if you want to go beyond that, I'm not sure that is allowed under law, or maybe you then have to go through some special
level of course. I think you're going to fill some forms, you're going to get some approvals.
And I think the central bank governor, did mention that you will fill forms, like a lot of them, so much that it can be discouraging.
Yes, the MD of the bank must sign.
Yes, exactly. So the point here is that, between you and I, we don't have issues transacting business. Even if you want to do a 1,000 naira transaction, you probably don't have any problem with transferring the 1,000 naira, electronically, except for the cost that you pay.
Because you pay for that.
Because you pay for that. So, but for those guys in the rural areas that do not even have access to mobile telephony, so to speak, where even if you choose to do USSD code,
the
networks in those areas, and I was speaking with someone who said in most of those areas, some people have to climb trees to get access to network. So that's how remote those arears are.
But we still have this. I believe we do.
Oh, you're a journalist.
I remember those days were 7 years back. You have to put your phone in some particular place for you to be able to
trust me. There are a lot of
places.
So
that there are still areas.
Yes. There are a lot of places like that.
I agree with you.
Today,
I totally agree.
If I travel to my parents' village today, you have to look for a strategic place for where you can get the network. So there are a lot of places like that. So and these are the people that are likely going to bear the brunt of what is happening. But I mean, I'm an economist, so I'm going to be fair. For every policy, there are winners, there are losers. What we are supposed to look at is the overall benefit on the economy. Now, my theory is that this could force most of those who are rebellious against technology to begin to embrace it. So because some people are not just going to do this, not because they can't even try, but because they're just stuck in their ways, they won't make a move. This could cause them to shift. But I believe that there are a lot of thinking that is going on beyond the impact on the economy or the effect on the economy, that probably the policymakers may be looking at. We are going into an electioneering period. This sort of thing could help to curb the incidences of vote buying. To a very large extent. We will say that is positive for the economy because we want the wishes and the will of the people to reflect when we conduct elections. But I mean, those are not the reasons that have been adduced by the central bank. Of course. But these are just other things that we could benefit from if this policy, continues. But between you and I, we probably don't have any issue, with some of these limitations. But we also need to be, mindful of how the informal sector and other businesses tend to suffer. But there are ingenious way of getting these things done. Like I was sharing with someone, some of these guys with the agency banking business, right, could now start transacting cash transactions in the informal sector.
Someone told me that we could start to see people sell the Naira notes if it gets to a point.
It's possible.
So that's change of business. We used to sell dollars before now.
No, it's possible. And let me tell you how that can work and may not necessarily be injurious to the economy.
Good.
It could be, take a typical market, Alade market in Lagos, or which other prominent market do we have? Yaba, Oyibo,
like Lagos Island.
These are markets where people could transact businesses in cash.
Yes.
And if you're, if you are into this agency banking business, you could actually work from store to store to mop up people's cash for your home business and then do the transfer to them. So, and these guys know.
That's another angle.
These guys know that if you are to go to the bank to withdraw as much as 5 million, you can only get 5 million in a month and you pay a cost of 5% for it. People may start charging you as little as 0.5, 1% to get their cash from them. I don't know if you get that point. So that could be, that is not necessarily injurious to the economy. In any case, it's actually going to help the central bank to achieve its objectives the more. Because people are aware that if these guys must go to the bank to do this withdrawal themselves, they pay as much as 5% if they are to get 5 million Naira cash out of the system. And these are the things that people may now start to say, okay, give me 1%, I'll give you the cash. And if you can mop up as much of that, then you still can be in business. I mean, that's just an idea for those who think that they may have been taken out of business.
Yeah. That's another idea for them. They're supposed to pay for that. But anyway, let's give them that on Business Nigeria for free. But I'm also worried. I know we've gone this route too before. When the monetary side or when the CBN comes up with policies like this, many will say it should be complemented by the fiscal side, and it's all politicking at the moment.
Absolutely.
So what are you looking at? What is your projection as we move? Now, not the end. We have days to the end of the year. Now we could say, okay, weeks to the end of the year. And what's your outlook with all of these challenges that we face moving to an election in just February?
Well, I think that the greatest burden on the central bank in the last 7 years has been, weak complementary policies coming from the fiscal side. And that's why it seems the central bank or the Monetary Policy Authority has taken so much, anchor borrowers program is in agriculture, is in entertainment, is, almost of the sectors
everywhere,
of the economy. Now, and these are because, in a normal economy, you should see efforts by both fiscal and monetary authorities complementing each other. Now, but it must be said that some of the policies that the central bank has come up with too has gotten a nod from the fiscal authority, one of which is this redesign of the currency. Yeah. I also want to believe that this new policy about cash management could not have been put out there, at least without, not a consent, so to speak, if we look at the independence of the central bank, but at least some, buy-in of the executive, the fiscal authority, to some extent. And I think I touched on that. The fact that we are going into an election year is one of the reasons why I believe that there's more that meets the eye from the policy, beyond, trying to manage some of the economic reasons that have been adduced by the CBN. I think that some of these policies may also be towards, curbing the incidences of election malpractices, of voters' inducement and all of those. These are positives that this policy, even if the government was not, the central bank was not thinking about this when they brought out this policy, this is, really going to help in that regard. In terms of outlook, we think that we shouldn't expect much from the fiscal authority.
I have said today that airlines will lose millions of dollars.
Well, it's a possibility, we shouldn't expect too much from the fiscal authority because, if you understand how this works, it seems that the government is winding down. If there is anything coming from Abuja, it will be towards having a free and fair election, as the last legacy that this administration can leave before the new administration comes in. So the much of policy throughout that we will see may be coming from the fiscal authority. And perhaps if there's anything that, monetary authority, if there's anything we are still able to get from the fiscal authority, it might be towards when the elections are over.
Yeah.
Just a few months after the elections and before handover. We may still see some moves that could be positive. But there are so many things that we need to brace for impact for as we go into 2023. One of which is the guidance by the fiscal authority that we may have to do away with subsidy.
I want to ask you, because you know what's been happening with scarcity and what's been happening with pricing. Yeah. I was thinking we're going to wrap up with that, yes. So what would be the first move of anybody that becomes the CEO? A decision must be taken on this issue.
It's one of the things that excites us. We gathered a lot of people in our industry, and we were talking about investment strategy outlook, yesterday. And one of the things that excites us is that if you look at the electioneering campaigns and where we are right now, it seems that there are frontliners in these 2023 elections. We identify 3 major political parties that are in the frontliner, and we believe that at least one of those 3 political parties will produce the next CEO, as you said.
Yes, the CEO.
And whoever this CEO is from these 3 leading political parties, 3 leading contenders that we have identified, I think Nigeria is going to be happy for it. Whoever emerges amongst these 3 people, because we have seen the 3 of them as pro-markets, they are pro-growth. We are at a state where, the next president, even if the president, has a different ideology, cannot do any other thing but to follow the way of the market. So one of the first set of actions that the next president must take is to do away with subsidy. Number 1, we can't afford it. Number 2, we are not funding the poor. Number 3, it's to the benefit of the rich, the middle class, and we have to stop all of those wastages. So that's one of the first critical decisions that needs to be taken, May 20. In fact, if I become the president, May 29, I will announce all the hard policies.
During the speech?
Yes, during the speech. I will announce the liberalization of the power sector, We are liberalized to some extent, but not fully.
Not fully, yeah.
That allows pricing. And we announce all the bad policies that I think I will put out. I will announce them that day. So if you will hate me,
but if it's business as usual, what could happen?
If it's business as usual, this country cannot survive it for long. We are in a dire strait. It's without scaring Nigerians from an economic point of view. I'm not talking. I'm not talking security or any other. In my space, we're in a dire strait. Look at the budget for 2023. 2023, we are planning to spend almost 21 trillion naira. The realistic revenue projection of government, even though government is planning to spend, to realize over 10 trillion, but their realistic revenue is probably between 5 to 6 trillion. Where are we going to fund the deficit? Number one, we can't fund it from the local debt market because it's too big. That deficit is too big for the local debt market. We can approach the international debt market because the Eurobonds yields are too expensive. In fact, the minister mentioned it, there is a no-go area. So the only other alternative is to print money. The more you print, the deeper we are getting with this inflationary pressure. So, the next president, and that's why we are happy, from my constituency, I think the market is happy that the leading candidates, 1, 2, 3 of them, without mentioning which parties they belong, that are likely to win these elections, right? They are pro-market people, and that's what excites the market in terms of looking into 2023.
It's tortured. Before we wrap up, I was thinking we would have just embarked on a phase removal of this. Maybe by now would have done more than 50% and would have been fair. I'm looking at how Nigerians would take that blow if that just happens.
You see, I think that has always been the rhetorics of the elites. And I think it's because the masses do not know better. So today you're spending
trust.
You're spending 4 trillion on subsidy, right? Realizable revenue of government, at least going by the 2022 budget, is barely 5 trillion. So you're spending 80% of your revenue to fund one product out of millions of products that Nigerians consume. And that product is PMS, petrol. Now, you don't fund diesel, you don't fund kerosene, you don't fund gasoline, you don't fund, you don't fund bread that the poor eat. How many poor people have cars driving on the road? How many of them can afford to even buy a generator? So just think about it. If Nigerians, if we claim that our consumption is 50 million, depending on who you're talking to now, they say it's between 50 or 90 million liters per day. I argue today in this studio, I know I'm being recorded, that barely 10% of that consumption is consumed by 90% of this population. Barely 10% of consumption of petrol is consumed by 90% of the population. So look at that skewness. If 10% is not consuming 90%, and I mean, looking at it from our poverty data, right? You're living below, people living below poverty line, $1.20 per day. That's barely 1,000 naira. Those who could not, spend 1,000 naira a day, would they have the luxury of a car? Would they have the luxury of a generator? And if they don't have those, how are they fueling those things? So the other things are things that impact them because they take transportation from one place to the other. There are ways to solve this. You could have a way of, cushioning the effect as a government. But to keep paying subsidy is the greatest disservice that any leader can do to this country going forward.
Let's leave it at that. Yes. Interesting conversation. Spent more than 20 minutes now, but I must thank you so much. It's always interesting talking to Chief Investment Officer of Afrinvest West Africa. He's a friend of the house, Mr. Robert Omotunde. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. We really appreciate this, making real sense. We appreciate your contribution.
Thank you.